Hello, welcome to another episode of the Busy Brains Hub podcast. It's been a couple of weeks. I kind of made a promise to myself that I was going to do this podcast feeling like relaxed and like I was enjoying it. And so when I had a couple of busy weeks, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to take it easy. I'm doing a nutrition course at the moment, and I for reasons that may seem obvious to you, left it until the last minute because why spend a year doing something when you can spend 3 months doing it? Maybe even less. So I've been working through that. I'm making headway, which is good. But today I thought I would talk about something that I saw come up recently on a YouTube video, and it just got me thinking about this a bit more. So it was just a little YouTube short, and it was on a channel that talks about ADHD quite a lot, and other things as well, like other mental health things. I'm pretty sure it's called, I can't remember now. I'll find out and I'll put it in the show notes. But anyway, on this little clip, it basically was like how ADHD impacts heart disease, right? And I was like, oh, cool. They're going to go into like the biological underpinnings of ADHD and things like the MTHFR gene and how like that relates to issues with things like stroke, and it can cause inflammation and homocysteine, blah, blah, blah. I was like getting really excited. And then I pressed play and it was a doctor saying, well, ADHD, a lot of ADHDers are really stressed. And we know that stress is linked to heart disease. And I was like, oh, okay, well, yes, stress is linked to heart disease, but stress and ADHD aren't the same thing. Yes, ADHD is a stress, but you can be stressed and you can have a stress issue, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have ADHD. So saying that this is how ADHD impacts heart disease didn't really make sense to me. ADHD and the heart, I think they called it something like that. ADHD affects the heart. So then I started thinking about stress, and I thought, what should I do for this podcast? And I thought, stress. Let's talk about stress and ADHD. So to start with, according to ChatGPT, which I actually think is pretty reliable with this stuff, about 80% of ADHDers will also experience like a stress issue, like an actual stress problem, chronic stress, or it could be acute stress, and we'll talk a bit more about that. Then everyone experiences stress. That's normal to experience stress, but it's the frequency that stress experience and then how it's dealt with as well that can be different for ADHDers. So I want to talk about that, and I thought I would kick off by sharing something that the psychiatrist in my psychiatry appointment I was talking about in my last episode said to me kind of straight off the bat as we started talking. And it was about how, in our modern day, there are more demands on people. There are more demands on our time. There are more demands on our attention. There are more distractions. And, it's important to think about that when we're talking about ADHD symptoms, because the symptoms of ADHD are more prevalent amongst everyone now because of these things. And I was like, that sounds like stress. And two, I'm like, I actually work really hard to make my life not stressful, but like everyday stress is what feels stressful to me. But it's not the kind of everyday stress that she was talking about. So for instance, I don't check my work emails after hours. I don't stress about work after I leave work. I don't have that kind of job where I stress about it. I have had those types of jobs, and yes, they cause more stress, but that's not what I mean when I talk about my ADHD. And so I was curious, for people listening to this, what that's like for you too. And you can comment on my Substack article post about this if you want to share as well. But basically, I think let's start with, we started twice. The next thing that we can talk about is let's talk a bit more about what stress actually is. So essentially, it's a response. It's a response to changes in our environment, it's a response to things that we believe could be happening that we need to be alert or aware of, right? So when we're talking about things like acute stress, it could be something as simple as like, I'm running late for the bus, I need to run now, and it triggers a bit of a fight or flight response, in this case flight response, gets our blood pumping, okay, I'm going to run for the bus. But then when we get on the bus, the idea is that stress response drops back down to, sort of baseline. So I guess one way to think about it is like the neurotypical kind of stress response is essentially, okay, stressor comes in and then we go back down to baseline. Stress comes in and then we go back to baseline. And the way that ADHD and stress works can be a little bit different, because we can actually be quite good when things are really stressful, but when things are a little bit stressful, we can have a really high response. So instead of it kind of being like, okay, goes a little bit above baseline and comes back down, we can end up having a problem with that regulation where we end up going all the way up, skyrocketing up to fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Fawn is when you people please to kind of reduce stress. One of the things that we talk about, you hear talked about quite a lot when it comes to ADHD, is rejection sensitivity. So rejection sensitivity is an example of how for one person, it could be like a reaction, someone's facial expressions, something that happens. Could be like water off a duck's back. It's just like, oh, yep, okay, cool. Like you were a bit annoyed at me about that. Okay, fine. But for someone who has rejection sensitivity, it can be like really, really stressful. You can be thinking about it for hours, days, weeks, right? We're really not coming back down to baseline. So that's when we start to look at things like chronic stress. Acute stress is like short-term response. Chronic stress is when it's long-term. So not only can it be that we're getting stressed above baseline more frequently, it can be that our stress response actually lasts for a really long time. Like we're talking weeks, where it's like we're just constantly in a state of stress. And when we're constantly in a state of stress, then our cortisol levels are going to be high more often. Our adrenaline is going to also be high more often. We have issues with regulating these things. They have biological reasons for that happening as well. And so we can end up being quite burnt out, exhausted, and just feeling like life is just really quite hard. So the other thing more specific to ADHD and stress that can be quite interesting to understand is that when we're actually looking at how we process stress or recognize stress, one of the things that can happen for a lot of ADHDers is something called, it's like a problem with interoception, which is essentially being able to pay attention to what's going on in your body. So for instance, feeling hungry, recognizing that the body feels hungry, thirsty, tired, and stressed. So it could be that instead of being like, oh, I'm really stressed out right now, things are a bit full on, it might not be until we get to the point of, oh, I've got a really bad headache, oh, I actually feel like nauseous in my stomach, that we actually start to recognize that there might be something going wrong. So we can have an issue with actually addressing the stress. We can kind of be a little bit on autopilot with these things and not be consciously trying to regulate things. So say, for instance, if we're in a state of emotional dysregulation, instead of trying to kind of go, okay, I'm feeling stressed, I'm going to take some deep breaths right now. The problem is it might be that we were stressed all day, and it's only when we've gotten home and we're feeling exhausted and we've got a massive headache that we might go, oh, something's not quite right. Oh, I've got a headache. Okay, maybe I'll take some, maybe I'll take some Panadol. Maybe I'll have a drink. Maybe I'll do something that I associate with helping me to feel like my headache's not there anymore. Now, I mentioned that with acute stress, it can be something that comes up more frequently, but then when it comes to really big stresses, we can actually deal with that okay. And so this is kind of to do with executive function and also like when adrenaline kicks in. So with ADHD, executive function can be not like as solid as what it is for someone who's neurotypical. So what that means is essentially when it comes to sort of like managing lots of things going on at the same time, it sort of like feels really overwhelming. Like, hang on, whoa, there's like way too many things going on now. Like, wait, what do I need to do? What's going on? And so when there's stress or when there's conflict, it can be even harder to like hold that all in our head. So it can just feel really, really overwhelming really quickly. One thing that I remember happening a lot with my first job in marketing was when I'd sit down to get a brief, and it'd be like I was getting told about a new project, and I'd have so many ideas, and I'd be so like, whoa, there's so much to do to like project manage this, that I kind of would just feel really, really stressed. And then I wouldn't be able to take in any information that was being told to me because I was just thinking about like all the things I had to do over and over and over and over in my head. So it can be really quite frustrating because it's kind of like, okay, already we're like a step behind maybe other people with actually being able to cope, and then we're not recognizing when we're not coping, and then if we don't recognize when we're not coping, then we can't sort of help our nervous system re-regulate. And I think this is also part of the reason that more and more people are talking about ADHD as something that's like an ADHD is a nervous system, the ADHD nervous system, not just the ADHD brain, because it links with all of these other things that are going on in terms of our nervous system can be, struggling to regulate. And then because of that, we can just end up feeling like we're sort of constantly in this fight or flight, freeze or fawn response. The other thing that's, I think, really interesting and important to talk about here is something called the HPA axis. So the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal gland axis. Now, this is where adrenaline comes in and where cortisol comes in. So essentially, our brain signals to our adrenals, hey, like, we need to move, we need to do something, we need to take action. Adrenaline, when we get adrenaline, our body functions in a different way. If you think about, like, at the moment I've been watching MasterChef, and it just made me think about that, like when you see someone in a pressure test, when you see someone cooking their heart out in a very short period of time, they've got like adrenaline. You can see like their hands are shaking and they're just like really focused on getting it done. And that feeling can actually be quite addictive. A lot of people with ADHD go into fields where they have that adrenaline rush. You see them working in frontline services like emergency departments, in the police force, in hospitality, like people who are chefs, people who are under a lot of pressure, because ADHDs can actually really thrive under pressure. We can actually think clearer when other people might feel too overwhelmed with stress. So it's kind of like other people might be going into a stress response that we find difficult as well, but we sort of go into this next level response where we're like, I know exactly what to do. I need to just do this one thing right now. And we can be really good in an emergency situation. So this is part of the reason I think that when we talk about stress, we can't just talk about stress as in like ADHDs experience stress more and stress impacts them the same way, and therefore here's the things that happen as a result. I'm like, stress is its own thing, ADHD is its own thing, and then ADHD and stress combined can look a little bit different. So then what do we do about that? What does that mean? I think the biggest thing that has helped me has been going to therapy. The type of therapy that I did that really helped was therapy that got me to actually focus on feeling what was going on inside my body. So actually going, instead of being in my head when I felt stressed and overthinking and catastrophizing, actually going into my body and just sitting with, where do I feel this in my body right now? What's going on for me right now? often I still will have some delay, and people who know me well will hear me say things like, I didn't work out that I had a problem with that yet. I didn't know I was feeling bad about that yet. I just, it's like I haven't caught up yet to actually thinking that part or feeling that part. I just was still processing it, right? And then at the same time, I might have an impulsive reaction. So an example would be, I'm triggered by something, I snap at someone, like I might talk a bit aggressively without even realizing, and then they'll go, whoa, like, why are you snapping? What's the problem? And then I have to think about it and go, what's going on? Did I snap? Oh, okay, I snapped. Why am I snapping? Oh, I think I'm a bit annoyed. Why am I annoyed? Oh, I'm not sure, but I have this feeling in my tummy. What's that feeling in my tummy about? And I have to process it. But the therapy helped me figure out that I need to pay attention to my body, that I actually need to pay attention to where I'm feeling it in my body. And then I can work from there, taking a few deep breaths and going, okay, all right, now I've got a place to kind of build from. The other thing that I think is really helpful, another word for that I think is mindfulness, by the way. Another thing that can also be helpful is actually looking at our physical health. So things like what we're eating and also how much we're exercising. So exercise is really, really important for stress management for everyone, right? Exercise, everyone benefits from exercise in lots of ways. But ADHD in particular, we really benefit from exercise. Exercise is a great way to get the body moving, to get healthy, positive, good endorphins moving around our body, and also to kind of release that adrenaline that might be sitting there from the stress response and resetting. That's one really, really great option. For me, I can kind of feel in my body after 2 days that I feel like my ADHD symptoms are more exacerbated if I don't exercise. So it's I exercise, it kind of resets, that lasts me a couple of days, then I need to go again to the gym. If I don't do that, or I don't go for a walk, or I don't go for a swim, then it starts to feel a little bit more like I'm going back into my old sort of nervous system. When I do those things, I feel more balanced. I've talked on this show before about feeling like I kind of am walking on a tightrope, but when I'm on the tightrope, I actually feel pretty balanced. I don't feel stressed. I feel like I can sort of manage the day to day, but that means not having too many stresses in my life, exercising enough, eating nutritionally, supportive nutrients as well. So that's, I guess, sort of the other piece I wanted to bring into the physical aspect of this. In terms of how we can help with our stress response, it's looking at what we're eating, what we're consuming, and so things that we might need to reduce, but also things we might need to bring into our diet. Some of the nutrients that a lot of ADHDers are particularly got a deficit in, and it partly can be because of genetic sort of influences on ADHD and how we absorb nutrients as well, is low magnesium. Having enough magnesium helps to keep us calmer. Not enough omega-3s. Omega-3s, again, also helps with brain function and helping us to feel calmer. Vitamin B, so there's lots of different vitamin Bs, and some of us don't absorb some of those vitamin Bs very well. So for instance, for me, folate, I can't really process certain types of folate or folic acid. My body's not very good at that, so I have to take a supplement so that I'm still sort of getting the benefits from folate, which impacts things like neurotransmitters like dopamine, serotonin, noradrenaline, lots of things that impact things like our reward system and our ability to concentrate. And then we can also have issues with things like if we're using caffeine as a way to try to help us pay attention or help to feel energized, then too much caffeine can also sort of ignite a little bit of that stress response. It can exhaust our adrenal glands if we have too much caffeine. So we have to look at how much caffeine we're having, when we're having it. Even things like making sure we're getting enough healthy fats and protein in our diet, amino acids, all of those things support our bodies so that when it comes to dealing with stress and coping with stress, we can function a little bit better. So I guess for me, part of the reason I wanted to talk about this is that I think when we talk about stress, we often focus quite a lot on like, okay, well, you just need to be less stressed, like, okay, like it's all in your control. Like you just need to not have so many stressful things in your life. And if you don't have so many stressful things in your life, then everything will be fine, but that's not how life always works. And there are always going to be stresses. So it's about how do we support ourselves and take care of ourselves. I also think a lot of the time we talk about self-care, but when we talk about self-care, we often talk about things like having a bath or taking care of our skin or doing our nails or something like that. And I'm like, that's fine. Like we can do those things. But like self-care also becomes about like taking care of our body, looking at like what nutrients are we putting into our body and how are we supporting ourselves. And it's this sort of catch-22 in the case of ADHD, because for a lot of us, it's like cooking can be really stressful. Having enough energy to cook can be stressful and can be exhausting. And so it's sort of like you're stressed, not you, as in one is stressed. And then you're like, okay, I feel stressed, so I'm going to just eat takeaway. And in that takeaway, it might be not that many great nutrients, not healthy fats, not kind of supporting us. And then it's like not helping us to feel energized. So we kind of get stuck in this cycle. And at the same time, we might be also going for snacks that aren't that healthy. Like I used to eat really, really like very much purely for the dopamine hit. So I smoked cigarettes. I was very addicted to chocolate, always been addicted to chocolate, and I still love chocolate, don't get me wrong. And potato chips, and like I would drink alcohol to sort of calm myself down as well. So a couple of nights a week, at least in my 20s, I'd go down the street to the corner shop, I'd buy a packet of cigarettes, 2 packets of chips, I'd have maybe a couple of beers at home, and that would be what I have for dinner, and it's like, I knew logically that wasn't healthy for me, but I was just so tired that I was like, this is all I can deal with right now. Like nicotine, it's a very common addiction for ADHDers because it kind of helps us to feel like alert. It gives us a nice little like rush. And so it's one of the really sort of common ones alongside things like caffeine, right? And now I've completely changed my diet, but I'm saying that more to be like, I know how difficult it can be when it comes to eating well and supporting ourselves so that our bodies actually stand a chance when it comes to things like dealing with the stress response. And so in summary, I know that was a lot, but I think like if we just start looking at like a couple of little things we can do that start to tip the scales towards taking better care of our body and our mind, we can start to shift the needle around stress so that we're not exacerbating ADHD symptoms. Yes, of course, we still have ADHD, but it's sort of like almost the same with something like eczema. A lot of us probably have, like a lot of people listening probably have experienced either allergies or eczema. It's very common to, with ADHD, also have these issues. And I can go into why that's the case at another time if people are interested. But if you think about eczema, like I get eczema on occasion. Thankfully now I don't get it very much. I used to have it a lot more, and it was also when I was smoking and not taking care of myself very much. Doesn't mean I never get eczema now, no, but I get it very rarely, and it's a lot less painful than it used to be. And I think that can be the same for us with ADHD too. It's not like about you can completely eradicate it, but you can kind of get yourself to a point where you're like, okay, I can sort of walk this tightrope a little bit easier, and maybe I can widen this tightrope a little bit more. That's what I had said to the psychiatrist I wanted to do for myself is, can I make that tightrope a little bit wider? And what I've realized is that because, like I talked about in the last episode, meds are probably not going to actually help me achieve that goal because of other comorbidities and things like that. I need to look at other ways to do that. And when I look at the times that I have been the calmest and most able to manage stress, it's when I make sure that I regularly exercise, and I just start to build myself back towards having that routine and structure that's going to support my well-being, not someone else's well-being, not like someone who's like neurotypical and stressed, because I'm like, it doesn't look the same for them. The things that people put out there that work for someone who's neurotypical don't necessarily work for someone like me in the same way. And that's okay. That's fine. It's great that they can manage their stress that way, but it's not necessarily what's going to work for me. And so that's part of what I want some of these episodes to help other people with, is like, how do we start to think about, how do we manage stress? How do we manage trauma? How do we manage things as a person who has ADHD? Because it will look a little bit different from us. So I'm going to leave it on that note to ask you a question of like what you think you could do, what would help you, maybe come up with a list of 3 things that you think would really help to start supporting yourself when it comes to your stress. And I will hopefully be back next week. I'd like to keep doing this every week if I can. And until then, I hope this has helped you live a more balanced-ish life. Cheers.